The Pittsburgh Steelers are taking an unconventional route to solve their quarterback woes, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of like it. We got all that and much more on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Locked On NFL. I'm standing in for Tyler Rowland today. My name is Ross Jackson, host here with the Locked On Podcast Network, and joining me today, as is every Monday, Legacy Lou is here. Louis DiBiase. You can also find him over at Locked On Eagles. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us every single day, making us your first listen, and for being an everydayer. And on today's episode of Locked On NFL, we're going to dive into a little bit of a conversation with Louis here. Should we be worried about the Philadelphia Eagles with all of their departures? We'll tell you why you shouldn't be pressing the panic button just yet. The Giants land the veteran quarterback, but I don't think they landed one, Louis, that's going to save Brian Daboll's job anytime soon. And we're going to kick this all off with looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation, as they are going a bit of an unconventional route to solve their QB woes. And I kind of dig it. So we're going to break all of that down here on today's episode, which is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. Lou, look, this is an interesting situation over in Pittsburgh. They're doing a lot of waiting. They're doing a lot of pursuit of Aaron Rodgers. I'm not a big fan of that part of what it is they're doing, but I do like the idea of them waiting to see what they can get in the 2026 NFL draft, as that quarterback class is just set to be better than this one this year.
Yeah, I think if you see Aaron Rodgers as your version of Tom Brady going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's going to put you over the top to become a Super Bowl team, I think you're a little bit delusional. I think Brady is one in that instance where most quarterbacks do not do that over the age of 40. But if it is seen as more of a bridge move and you are going to take a swing in the first round regardless of where you're picking, then I can get behind that. But the Steelers are going to probably be 9-8 again and picking in the same spot next year they are this year. So the quarterback talent will probably be around the same when they're picking. So I would honestly just take a swing this year, but that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I'm not mad at the idea. I just think, man, if you have an opportunity to grab somebody that's going to be of quality, it's next year's draft class to dip into. But you are right about the draft position of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they are doing something a little interesting here this season to get them ready for next season. Here's what Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter had to say about the quarterback approach.
Teams have not just found success just because they've landed a quarterback. They've not won a Super Bowl. That's what I mean by that. They've gotten better. There's quarterbacks that have certainly upgraded rosters. But again, I repeat, since the 2004 draft, when Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger were selected, there has been only one quarterback selected in the top 10 who has led the team that drafted him to win a Super Bowl. And that was Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not a guaranteed thing that you're going to get that guy. I think anybody who studies the history of drafting quarterbacks knows sometimes it takes multiple swings. Sometimes you miss on guys. But the point is that you want to take those swings, because all you have to do is hit it once, and then you can be good for the next 10 to 15 years.
I kind of dig the approach of multiple swings, Louis. I think it's a little bit of a middle ground between where you and I are, and maybe fits a little bit closer to where you are, in terms of like, take a swing this year, see what happens. And if you have to take a swing again in 2026, then sure, take a swing again in 2026.
Yeah, Ross, quarterback evaluation is just, it's not black and white, and anything it feels like can work. Anthony Richardson and Josh Allen, I felt like, are very similar prospects in college. One becomes an MVP. One's fighting for their life in the NFL right now against Daniel Jones. So I just think you have to take swings, because, I mean, look at Jalen Hurts. Was he seen as the prototypical quarterback prospect that was going to pan out? No, and yet here he is as a Super Bowl MVP. And especially when you're a team like Pittsburgh, and that was my point earlier, when you're constantly picking in that 15 to 32 range, and you're in that second wave, you're not going to find a perfect prospect. Even though Kenny Pickett didn't work in 2022, I like that they took that swing. Because it didn't work, though, I feel like they've gotten gun shy. You got to try it again. So if it's next year, fine. But I hope they're not just going to go year to year, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, another veteran. Like, eventually you got to try this strategy to get out of that purgatory.
Yeah, I'm curious about, like, right now they're in line, the Pittsburgh Steelers, to receive a third, fourth, and sixth round compensatory set of compensatory selections for 2026. And they don't seem to be rushing to make moves that are going to end up canceling those out. Even the Aaron Rodgers move, I believe, technically doesn't count against the compensatory formula because that was a termination, not actually his contract expiring. And so with that being the case, I'm curious if maybe they're stockpiling some of this stuff to maybe help them move up. But look, they're drafting number 21 this year. Mike Tomlin's probably not going to have you drafting any worse than that. They also added DK Metcalf. They still have George Pickens. They're working on their run game. They've bolstered their defense, these other pieces that are all still there for sure. But there is a sense of urgency, as defensive tackle Cameron Hayward said about the team, that they are operating with that sense of urgency. But more than likely, you're right. They're picking right in the middle. And so I'm curious how much maybe this compensatory pick formula might actually work in their favor to allow them to be able to jump up and go. If you were to select a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, Louis, who would you go for in this year's draft?
I like Jackson Dart. I think after Cam Ward, after Shedeur Sanders, look, Jalen Milroe is very enticing. I think he has one elite trait that's very interesting, and it's that mobility, right? I mean, the guy has potentially like sub 4.4 speed, but I think 21's a little bit too rich for the Steelers' blood. If they were to trade down, then maybe, but Jackson Dart's a player that I like, and that's a kind of player that's similar to a Bo Nix type from the Denver Broncos last year. Yep. Look how it worked out for Denver. I think it could work for Pittsburgh. The thing is, if you're going to look towards 2026, though, and you don't like either one of these prospects, again, bringing in Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if that's the best move if you're looking for a bridge quarterback. Maybe you should have made a move kind of like the Giants just did with Jameis Winston to... Right. Because that's the thing. If you're looking still long term, why are you like this? These veteran moves are just going to keep you in this purgatory. But I think if they had to take a swing right now, I personally like Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I think I made the you actually brought his name up earlier. I think in an earlier episode with Tyler, I had made sort of the big leap of they should call up the Indianapolis Colts and see if they're interested in moving Anthony Richardson.
Sure.
Like that's who I would go after if I was them. That way you don't have to surrender a first round pick in order to do it. You can still invest that number 21 overall selection however you choose in this upcoming draft. You're probably moving later draft capital to do that. It kind of balances your books a little bit in a way that allows you to be able to get that young player that you could potentially see develop that has the arm to be able to take advantage of the downfieldedness that you're going to get out of DK Metcalf as well as George Pickens. But then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You probably didn't have to give up a ton to do it. You're not giving up a big contract in order to do it. And you're not looking at necessarily a bridge veteran in terms of an experienced veteran like an Aaron Rodgers. And you're more likely to be right back into a situation where you could potentially walk away with a nice selection at quarterback in 2026, which is expected to be a really solid NFL draft class when it comes to that position. So that's the route I would go. I'm calling up Indianapolis to see if they're willing to move off A-Rich.
Yeah, Ross, I just think teams in the NFL are too scared to make a mistake, and the Steelers are kind of the epitome of that right now, and that's why they're just every single year going for these veterans. But I love that kind of approach of going for it. If you're not willing to draft an Anthony Richardson or make a trade for that kind of player, odds are you'll never have a Josh Allen type because that's the kind of risk you need to be willing to take, and Pittsburgh just hasn't been willing to take that risk. Whether it's in 2025 or in 2026, they've got to do it to get out of this just... It feels like Groundhog's Day in Pittsburgh. They're supposed to be a team that always guns for the Super Bowl, and they don't settle, but they've kind of settled over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And one team that is going to do something far from settling when it comes to quarterback are the New York Giants and the signing of Jameis Winston, which I think is a great signing. Probably just not the best signing for Brian Daboll's job. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On NFL brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Think of Monarch Money as your personal CFO. You ever go and check your bank account and then have to ask yourself, where did all my money go? Don't worry, we've all been there. It's happened. You're not alone, and you're certainly never going to be alone again once you check out Monarch Money, which gives you full visibility and control over your finances, not only allowing you to be able to track your spending, but also your investments, other pieces that you might be looking at as well, like maybe accounts that you've got, maybe even joint accounts, because there's collaboration opportunities so that you can share financial goals with folks that help keep you on the same page without all of the stress. You can find it all in one app over with Monarch Money. today. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com to get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook that's giving you everything you need in terms of having a chance to get in on all of the action across March Madness, which is officially here and rolling right along. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 that you can then use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even down to who's cutting down the net. I always like to go and find, and my recommendation for people that are putting down their first $5 as their first bet, go and find a heavy favorite in terms of a big spread and then put it down on the money line on the favorite. That way you win a little bit by putting $5 down on the heavy favorite that way, but you get that $200 in bonus bets. And don't worry, everything that you do with FanDuel in terms of your winnings is fast and easy. FanDuel is simple to use. When you win, it helps you get paid out instantly. No waiting around. You can find it all today at FanDuel.com so you can get in on all that college basketball action all tournament long. All right, everybody, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On NFL. Louis DiBiase, Ross Jackson here in for you. Happy birthday to Tyler Rowland, who's out today, our guy. So we were happy to be able to give him a little bit of time here as Louis and I get you up to date on all the biggest stories around the National Football League with the local experts that know your favorite teams better than anybody else. Make sure you subscribe and stay subscribed here on Locked On NFL. Louis, next thing that I wanted to take a look at here with you, buddy, is the New York Giants. I know this is a team that is near but not dear to your heart when it comes to the NFC East rivals, but I just thought this was such an interesting signing. And we're the perfect tandem to discuss this because it's the Giants in the division and it's the signing of Jameis Winston, who I have personally covered myself. So before you and I dive into what I think is a very fun signing, let's hear what producer Trainer from Locked On Giants had to say about it.
The New York Giants' search for a veteran bridge quarterback is finally over. So Giants and Jameis Winston have agreed to terms on what is being reported as a 2-year deal worth $8 million. That, with incentives, can go as high as $16 million. Winston met with the Giants last week but left without a contract, as it was thought at the time that the team would be willing to wait out Aaron Rodgers. But with reports of Rodgers having gone to visit the Steelers, and with a separate report by the NFL Network that the Steelers and Rodgers already have the parameters of a contract in place, the Giants, who also hosted a visit last week with Russell Wilson, decided to move on in their search and get Winston into the fold. Now, Winston apparently checks the boxes for the Giants, who are still expected to draft a quarterback in April's draft, whether it's in the first round or on day 2. The guy that they pick, of course, being one that Winston will mentor.
Okay. There's several things that I love about this, Louis. I love that the Giants didn't just sit around and wait on Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't deserve it. Move on. I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that they're bringing in Jameis Winston with the idea of him being a mentor because he is a heck of a mentor. He is an awesome dude in terms of being able to translate defenses, have those conversations. He's managed adversity throughout his career in the NFL. He's had off the field incidents that, could have destroyed his reputation when he was younger and in college that he has sort of moved past and kind of reconciled with and all these other things. He knows how to navigate the media and he does it extremely well. There's just a lot of things that I like about this. However, this will not be a hire or a signing, rather, that saves Brian Daboll's job. I think Brian Daboll is dead man walking going into 2025.
No, I totally agree. I actually think this is a good sign, though, for Giants fans out there that want them to not settle for Aaron Rodgers or go for Russell Wilson. And they are kind of delusional. They think that kind of move would save their job anyway, even if it got them 8 to 9 wins. I just can't imagine that does bring them back next year. The only chance I think that Brass has of coming back is by drafting somebody like Shadur Sanders with that 3rd overall pick. Seeing signs of growth from him in his rookie year. That's how you save your job. And I actually think the Jameis Winston signing is a good sign for Giants fans that want that strategy. I think it doesn't preclude you from, stopping the Aaron Rodgers pursuit, but I'm with you. Rodgers playing this waiting game again. It's driving me nuts. It doesn't stop you from bringing in Russell Wilson. But it is a good sign that they want Winston to be that mentor for a rookie quarterback that they bring in. Whether it's like Patricia said, if it is Shedeur or maybe it's day 2, it is a Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe type. I think that's a good sign for Giants fans that don't want them to go all in on a veteran.
Yeah, and especially when you're looking at the idea of bringing in a mentor, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, in my opinion, much better mentors than what Aaron Rodgers would be.
Yeah,
Aaron Rodgers is a guy that usually comes in and, starts demanding his guys and wanting his people around and all this stuff. He's not worried about, anybody else's success. He's kind of focused on his own more than anything else. And we've seen what that got teams like the New York Jets, teams like the Green Bay Packers late in his career when they went back and brought all of his friends back before eventually moving on like the very next year. Like, we know that this doesn't work when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. And so let Aaron Rodgers go and do his thing elsewhere. Let him figure out where he's going to land. And wherever he lands, I'm sure he'll have a solid season. But for New York, I just thought this was a really, really good move by them. And one that I think, honestly, Louis, is one of my favorite moves of the offseason, which is where we're going to go next. What is your favorite move that you've seen a team make so far in NFL free agency? Yeah,
there's been a few moves that I really like, but I think the number one signing that I'm a big fan of is the New York Jets bringing in Justin Fields for QB1.
I love you keeping it in the Big Apple there. Let's go to, before we hear your why behind that, I want to check in and kind of refresh our memory from John Butchko, host of Locked On Jets, and what he had to say about that very signing.
A match that makes a lot of sense. Fields' career has not gone how he's hoped it would. Struggles through his 3 years in Chicago, a year in Pittsburgh where he was unable to beat out Russell Wilson for the starting job, but still plenty of natural ability. And the Jets need a quarterback. There's probably no quarterback out there with more upside than Fields. The Jets can design an offense around his strengths, including incorporating his ability as a runner. There's no guarantees that this will work, but this was probably the best option in front of the Jets.
I think it probably was the best option in front of the Jets, and I'm actually glad that they went that route. So John highlights the mobility of Justin Fields and being able to build a system around him with that leadership there. What is it that you liked about this signing for the Jets?
I just think Justin Fields, is he ever going to be an elite quarterback? No, but he is a high floor player that has elite traits, which can lead to elite moments. And the times that he's not being elite, he's going to be steady. I think he can be a poor man's Jalen Hurts 2024. If you build a run-heavy offense that's very predicated on play-action passing, the RPO game, let's say they draft like a Tyler Warren from Penn State, add him at tight end to Garrett Wilson, Justin Fields, I think, can make that kind of offense work. Again, is he going to be Jalen Hurts and win a team a Super Bowl? Maybe not. But the New York Jets, I think this is kind of the best solution that you could have to their current quarterback problem. And after Aaron Rodgers, we talked about Aaron Rodgers not being a mentor, not being a good locker room culture guy. I think Justin Fields is the opposite. And I think the Jets really need that, especially for their wide receiver one, Garrett Wilson. They need to keep that guy healthy. Bringing in his old quarterback from Ohio State, I think is a good idea. I liked what I saw from Fields last year, those first 6 games with Pittsburgh. I saw growth in the turnover department. They kind of had the leash on him a little bit too much. Let's see what happens in New York. But considering the Jets' hands were kind of tied with their situation, I think it's the best kind of move with the most upside they can make.
Yeah, I really like that. I love the connection to the reconnection at the Ohio State teammates and all that. Yeah. It's a really, really solid point on that. I think Fields is one of those players that has the system now behind him that will support. He's got a defensive head coach that's going to want to run the football. That's not going to want to take a lot of risks. It's going to trust his defense, all those other things. I think that can work in Justin Fields' favor for sure, especially with the promising things we saw from him over in Pittsburgh. Yeah. My favorite move this offseason has really been kind of the revamp of the offense over in Seattle, headlined by the signing of quarterback Sam Darnold. Here's what Corbin Smith over at Locked On Seahawks had to say about that signing.
Darnold was a revelation last season, very similar to Geno Smith in 2022 in Seattle, breaking out with 35 touchdown passes and over 4,300 passing yards, ranking 5th in both categories in the NFL, led the Vikings to a 14-3 record. He's only 27 years old. To bring in a player who still has room to grow and is going to be playing a system under Clint Kubiak that has a lot of similarities to what he played in with Kevin O'Connell last year.
A lot of similarities for sure. But what I do know about Clint Kubiak is that he lacks in the adjustments department. So he won't have the ability to be able to pivot unless he's developed that. the way that Kevin O'Connell does. But I do think that having a veteran quarterback that has been through a lot of systems, that's been through a lot, managed a lot of adversity as well, in a Sam Darnold, will be able to kind of help to push all that. They add Cooper Kupp to the equation, everything. I love that signing for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and I feel like Seattle was kind of in a Pittsburgh-like situation with Geno Smith, where they had reached their ceiling. There wasn't kind of a way out. Sam Darnold, is he going to be an elite franchise quarterback for them long-term? I'm not sure, but at least there's more of a chance. We know Geno Smith wasn't going to be that guy. They added Cooper Kupp. They have JSN, like players that he can get the ball out quickly to over the middle of the field. But I am still concerned about what they're going to do with that offensive line. We saw in the past how Sam Darnold did not handle pressure very well with New York, with Carolina. That's going to be a big thing I'm monitoring heading into the draft. But yeah, I think that's the best they could have did this offseason, a quarterback similar to the Jets with Fields.
Yeah, and Seattle's having a tough time right now revamping that offensive line. They keep bringing in visits and no one's signing. So it's been a little bit of a challenge for them for sure. Hey, and I do want to say real quick, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, don't sleep on this guy in Seattle either.
Was red hot the second half of the year for sure.
Those two guys were on fire together last year here in New Orleans. Coming up next, we want to talk Philadelphia Eagles with Louis here, because the Philadelphia Eagles may be the team with amongst the most departures, but we're going to tell you why you shouldn't be hitting the panic button as a Philadelphia Eagles fan just yet. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, everybody, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL. Louis, we got to talk some Philadelphia Eagles here, man, because the Eagles have seen a little bit of an exodus for their roster. I'm going to go over a couple of players, couple of names that the Philadelphia Eagles have lost, and I want you to tell me why Eagles fans shouldn't be pressing the panic button on these losses. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So as we take a look at some of the players that we have seen depart from the Philadelphia Eagles, defensive tackle Milton Williams, offensive lineman Mekhi Becton, defensive lineman Josh Sweat, all of them end up elsewhere. Josh Sweat with the Cardinals, Mekhi Becton with the Chargers, and Milton Williams over with the New England Patriots. There are a couple of other names as well, Louis, guys like James Bradberry and Darius Slay, which honestly, those felt like they were kind of on the way anyway, kind of aging veteran corners. There's some young corners in that on that roster already. Kenneth Gainwell heading to the Pittsburgh Steelers after their loss of Najee Harris and stuff like that. But it feels like that three, Williams, Sweat, Becton, was kind of the big trifecta. Why should Eagles fans not be panicking at this point, seeing all of this sort of roster exodus?
Yeah, because the reason they can't pay these players is because they're paying so many other elite players on this roster. And I'm not going to sit here and say the Eagles are a better football team without Josh Sweat, without Mekhi Becton, without Milton Williams. I'm not happy with the Chauncey Garner-Johnson trade. I think that was a mistake sending him to Houston. That's an energy guy that really revived this defense this year. But the reason these guys weren't able to be paid like A players is because I think they're B players the Eagles didn't see worth the contracts, because they're paying a lot of their A tier 1 stars on offense, and they're getting ready to pay a lot of their tier 1 players on defense. Like Jalen Carter, a huge reason Milton Williams was able to get $26 million a year in New England is because every game he's getting one-on-one mismatches, because Jalen Carter's getting all that attention. And now he's going to be getting maybe $40 million a year. He might get that Myles Garrett contract next year. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, Ross. Look how many corners like Derek Stingley are getting $30 million a year. Eventually, like down the road, they have to prepare for some massive contracts on defense now too. So they have such a complete roster that they could afford to lose these guys. And they have a lot of young players waiting in the wings that I think can fill the shoes of these players. Moro Ojomo, I think, is somebody that could have a breakout year defensive tackle. You were a fan of him coming out of Texas, right?
Man, one of my favorites.
I mean, Jalix Hunt was, outside of Josh Sweat, I think the second best pass rusher in that Super Bowl. And you look at Jalix Hunt, I just think at right guard, Mekhi Becton was great last year, but Jeff Stoutland has turned every starter at that spot into a stud. And he's playing in between a Hall of Famer in Lane Johnson and a rising star in Cam Jurgens at center. So, there's kind of, to end my rant, why I think those three are replaceable. But I don't want to sit here and say, like, they're not good players that the Eagles are going to miss, because those guys were instrumental in winning a championship.
Yeah, look, the NFL is a game of attrition, right?
Yeah.
You're going to lose players. The biggest thing you can do is not necessarily always fight to keep those players, but instead have the next players ready to step up.
Exactly.
Like, you mentioned Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Darius Slay and James Bradberry go somewhere else, but how many teams right now would swap places with the Philadelphia Eagles when it comes to having Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean versus their top two?
Right.
Let's say DBs out of respect to Cooper DeJean and all the things that he can do. You know what I mean? Like so many teams would say, yeah, no, those are the starting corners, right? Not those other guys. They were somewhere else. And then I will also go so far as to say that I think that what Howie Roseman has proven that he can do, whether it comes from trade acquisition, shout out to Howie for deciding to pay a linebacker and keeping Zach Bond in the building in an NFL that typically doesn't want to pay linebackers. And for a team that historically has not paid
especially Howie Roseman, Ross. This is a first.
So it's clear that when there's an opportunity to go out there and keep the player, he'll go out there to try to keep the player. He paid a linebacker and he paid a running back this offseason. Not a lot of teams in the NFL are doing that right now.
Thought I'd never see the day.
Right. And so for me, like that to me was one of the biggest sells in terms of the departures elsewhere, is that I was like, okay, well, he could have very easily given that money to defensive tackles, to cornerbacks, all this other stuff. But that's not where he went. He went and he gave the money to the linebacker and the running back that were game-changing for that team. And that, to me, told me, oh, well, it wasn't just that they got an offer, they got an opportunity to go elsewhere. That told me that the Eagles were prepared for them to step away.
I just think he made a good act on a lesson that he learned after they won the Super Bowl in 2017. I think he got way too loyal, handing out extensions to Jason Peters and Alshon Jeffrey, and he tried to keep that whole team together and just run it back, and I think that really hurt them for a few years. So I think Howie Roseman, his greatest strength is learning from his past mistakes, and I think letting these guys go, it might not help them in the short term, but in the long run, I think they're going to be better off for it. So yeah, it sucks to lose those guys, but I think this roster is still the most complete in the NFL.
The run it back mentality in the NFL does not work.
Doesn't work.
We're watching it again here in New Orleans. They're doing a whole bunch of running it backedness. They changed the coaching staff. I think it's going to be just a multi-year flip process is really what it is. Coaching staff this year, roster next year. Yep. But we see it. I mean, even the Kansas City Chiefs don't run it back every year. It feels like it because you have the franchise quarterback and the quarterback isn't changing, but like the wide receiver core consistently changes. They've added to the running backs. The defense has had a lot of change over all these other things. Like these two teams, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, have continued to find success without the mentality of keep the band together. And I think that is a more effective way to build rosters in today's NFL, considering the talent that you're now able to grab in rookie classes. You're grabbing better talent, more guys that are able to come in and have a lesser leap to make from college to the pros than in years past. And the other piece of it is that, like, for whatever reason, it seems that the longer that a player sticks around at a non-premium position, the more complacent they get sometimes. And so you're seeing teams make those aggressive decisions to be a year early, quote unquote, as opposed to a year late. And I think we're watching both of the two teams that we have watched in Super Bowls consistently in the last decade, half decade, have pushed against that mold. And
Russ, last thing I'll say on it too is look at the one dynasty, or the other dynasty of the 21st century, the New England Patriots. That dynasty was really a two-man dynasty, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I mean, that team looked different every single year. That's kind of the way the reality is in the NFL. You have to do that to have sustained success. So the Eagles are trying that, and we'll see if it works in 2025.
Yeah, rebuilds don't have to be scary, and you don't have to wait to bottom out to rebuild or to retool, whatever it is, whatever phrase teams want to use today and everything like that. I know rebuild is like a dirty word in the NFL now, but like seriously, you don't have to bottom out to flip your roster and acquire new talent. I don't think you have to do that, and I think these teams are absolutely proving it. Louis, thank you so much, man. As always, an absolute pleasure to be able to hop on and share the mic with you. For Louis DiBiase, I am Ross Jackson. Tyler Rowland and the band will be back throughout the rest of the week. Thank you for joining us here on this Monday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. And we'll see you here soon. Thanks for making us your first listen, for being everydayers. For your second listen, go and check out Locked On NFL Draft. Get ready for the NFL Draft, which is crazy close, wildly close to where we are now. So go and check them out as well. We'll see you here soon. Next time on Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.